We don't need to make other species more like humans, she concluded. We need to recognize that every species adapts in its own way. The Confederation's technological prowess, the Union's biological resilience. They're two paths to the same goal: survival. The aftermath was swift but far-reaching. The weapons research program was dismantled, its findings carefully studied for medical applications rather than military ones. The adaptive hull technology, proven in their escape, became the foundation for a new era of cooperative engineering between humans and aliens. And in a quiet moment, as the political storm began to settle, Zaxtel found Alina in one of the Capitol's observation lounges, staring out at the stars. They're establishing new protocols for cross-species research, he told her. No more secret experiments. No more attempts to force evolution. Instead, they're talking about learning from each other. Actually working together. Adaptation at its finest, Alina smiled. Sometimes the best way to survive isn't to change yourself, but to change how you interact with others. Is that another human survival trait? Zaxtal asked, his dorsal spines rippling with amusement. Maybe the most important one, she replied. After all, what good is surviving if you can't help others survive too? As they watched ships from a dozen species dock at the Capitol station, Zaxtel reflected that perhaps this was the greatest lesson humanity had to teach the galaxy. Not their physical resilience or their technological ingenuity, but their fundamental understanding that true adaptation meant growing together, not apart. The deadly poison that had started their adventure lay forgotten in the wreckage of Artemis Station, but its legacy lived on in a very different form. A galaxy learning that the strongest adaptation of all was the ability to change how you saw the world and your place in it. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, other secrets waited to be discovered, not by humans alone, or by the Confederation alone, but by species working together, each bringing their own kind of adaptability to the greatest challenge of all: understanding the universe and their place in it. The administrator's avatar froze. Impossible. Maya allowed herself a small smile as she began processing the ancient distress call. No, administrator, not impossible. Just unexpected. Station, begin full spectrum analysis and prepare for emergency protocols. The signal was weak, but clear now that she knew what to look for. Somewhere out there, nearly a millennium ago, someone had launched a distress beacon. And somehow, against all odds, it had continued broadcasting all this time, waiting for someone to notice. Waiting for someone who knew how to listen. Administrator, Maya said, her voice firm. I respectfully suggest you alert the Emergency Response Division. We're about to make history. The avatar flickered once more before disappearing, leaving Maya alone with her discovery. She leaned back in her chair, watching the ancient signal pulse across her screens. The automated systems would never have caught this. They were designed for efficiency, for processing the expected. But space wasn't about the expected. It was about the impossible becoming possible, about finding hope in the darkness between the stars. That's why humans still had a place out here, no matter what the collective believed. Maya began composing her official report, knowing that somewhere out there, a mystery nearly a millennium old was waiting to be solved. And she was the only one who could hear it calling. The stars continued their eternal dance outside her viewport as she worked, their light a reminder of all the secrets still waiting to be discovered in the vast expanse of space. Secrets that required more than algorithms to uncover. Secrets that needed human hearts. 3 days of constant signal analysis had left Maya exhausted. But she couldn't stop now. The ancient beacon's message was finally beginning to yield its secrets, revealing layers of information that had been broadcasting silently through the void for centuries. Display overlay matrix, temporal variance pattern. She commanded, watching as ghostly lines of data formed a three-dimensional grid in the command center's holographic display. The station's AI had been processing the raw data continuously, but it was the subtle variations, the almost imperceptible irregularities in the signal that told the real story. Impressive work, Operator Chen. Maya turned to find Captain Sarah Rodriguez's hologram standing in the command center. The Emergency Response Division had responded to her discovery with unprecedented speed, dispatching their flagship, the Artemis, to her sector. "Captain," Maya nodded, hiding her relief at seeing another human face. "I've isolated something in the signal pattern. Something the AIs missed." Rodriguez's hologram moved closer to the display. Even through the projection, Maya could see the captain's eyes narrow with interest. "Show me." Maya manipulated the holographic matrix, highlighting a recurring pattern in the signal structure. "See these fluctuations? They're not random degradation. They're deliberate modifications to the original beacon's code. Someone was alive to modify the signal." Rodriguez's voice sharpened with interest. "Not just alive. They were adapting it, using the beacon's basic framework to encode additional information." Maya expanded the display, revealing layers of embedded data. "The original distress call is just the surface. Underneath well, I think it's a story." The captain's hologram crossed her arms, a gesture Maya recognized from her own dealings with the collective. "The administrator is pushing for us to hand this over to their automated analysis systems." "Of course they are," Maya muttered, then caught herself. "Sorry, Captain. But these modifications, they're subtle, personal. The AIs would categorize them as errors and filter them out. We'd lose everything that makes this signal unique." Rodriguez's hologram smiled slightly. "That's exactly what I told them. The Artemis will reach your position in 6 hours. Until then, keep digging. What else have you found?" Maya brought up another layer of data. "The signal's origin point isn't fixed. It's moving, but not like a ship in distress. More like what? Like something trapped in a loop." Maya highlighted the signal's trajectory analysis. "The beacon's been repeating the same curved path through space for centuries. Whatever it's attached to is caught in some kind of spatial anomaly." The captain's expression grew serious. "A ship?" "I think so. And Captain." Maya hesitated, then forged ahead. "I think there might be survivors." The hologram flickered as Rodriguez leaned forward. "Explain." "The most recent signal modifications are only a few decades old. Someone was alive to make those changes, and recently enough that they might still be out there." Maya pulled up the decay analysis. "The beacon's power source is like nothing we've seen before. It could theoretically broadcast for another millennium." "The collective won't like this," Rodriguez mused. "They've been pushing their automated rescue protocols as the new standard. A centuries-old human survival story doesn't fit their narrative." Maya's response was interrupted by a priority alert. Her screens filled with new data as the signal suddenly intensified. "Signal strength increasing," the station AI reported. "New data patterns detected." Maya's fingers flew across the interface, interpreting the fresh information. "Captain, the signal, it's changing, adapting. It knows we're listening." Rodriguez's hologram straightened. "I'm accelerating the Artemis approach. Keep monitoring that signal. If someone's really been trapped out there all this time, they've been waiting a very long time to be found." Maya finished. She turned back to her screens, mind racing with possibilities. "Captain, request permission to attempt communication." "Denied." A new voice cut in. Administrator Vex's avatar materialized in the command center. "The collective has assumed primary authority over this investigation. Operator Chen, you will transfer all signal data to our automated analysis systems immediately." Maya looked to Rodriguez, whose hologram had taken on the rigid posture of someone controlling their anger. "Administrator," the captain said carefully, "this is a potential rescue operation involving human survivors. It falls under Emergency Response Division jurisdiction, a hypothesis based on one human operator's emotional interpretation of corrupt data," the administrator countered. "Our systems have analyzed the signal. It is simply a malfunctioning beacon, nothing more. We will dispatch automated recovery drones to collect it for study." Maya felt her chest tighten. "You can't. The signal patterns indicate a delicate situation. Automated systems could disrupt the temporal loop, or worse. Your protests are noted. Operator Chen. The administrator's avatar turned to Rodriguez. Captain, the Artemis will stand down. This is now a collective operation. Maya watched the signal pulse on her screens, its layers of hidden meaning calling out across the centuries. Someone had survived out there, adapting and modifying their call for help as decades turned to centuries. They had held on, hoping that someone would understand not just the signal, but the story hidden within it. She couldn't let the collective reduce that story to a series of data points. Maya's fingers moved across her interface, initiating a series of commands she had hoped never to use. Administrator, I'm invoking Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. The avatar flickered. That protocol is obsolete. No, Maya said firmly. It's just been waiting for the right moment. Captain Rodriguez, as the human operator of this station, I am declaring a humanitarian emergency requiring immediate human intervention. By treaty law, that supersedes collective authority. Rodriguez's hologram smiled. Acknowledged, Operator Chen. The Artemis will maintain its current course. Administrator, I suggest you review the original treaty regarding human-operated relay stations. You'll find that Protocol 7 Alpha is very much still in effect. The administrator's avatar vanished without response, but Maya knew this wasn't over. The collective would fight back through official channels, trying to assert their authority over what they saw as a simple technical matter. But they were wrong. This wasn't just about a signal, or even about potential survivors. This was about the heart of what made humanity different from the collective's cold efficiency. It was about understanding that behind every distress call, every emergency beacon, there were people hoping someone would hear not just their signal, but their story. Captain, Maya said, turning back to her analysis, I think I'm starting to understand what they were trying to tell us. And if I'm right, we're going to need every human insight we can get. The signal pulsed steadily on her screens as the Artemis raced toward her station, carrying hope across the darkness between the stars. The Artemis emerged from hyperspace in a cascade of blue light, its massive form dwarfing Maya's relay station. Through her viewport, she could see the ship's emergency response systems already deploying, arrays of sensors extending like delicate fingers into the void. Signal source located, Maya announced, her voice carrying to both her station's command center and the Artemis bridge. Bearing 227 Mark 43, approximately 3 light hours from our position. Confirmed, Captain Rodriguez responded from the Artemis bridge. Maya, you should get over here. We're going to need your expertise up close. Maya glanced at her screens, where the ancient signal continued its haunting pulse. The station. We'll continue monitoring under ag control, a new voice cut in. Dr. Ilara Voss, the Artemis chief scientist, appeared beside Rodriguez in the holographic projection. For the next few hours, at least even the collective systems can handle basic relay functions. Maya smiled at the subtle jab, then began her shutdown sequence. 20 minutes later, she was stepping onto the Artemis's bridge, her first time on a ship this size. The Emergency Response Division didn't spare any expense on their vessels, and it showed in every detail. Welcome aboard, Rodriguez said, extending her hand. Now show us what you found. Maya linked her personal interface to the bridge's main display. The signal analysis she'd been working on bloomed across the screens, layers of data interweaving in complex patterns. The modifications to the original beacon weren't random, she explained, highlighting specific sequences. They're memories, encoded into the signal itself. Whoever was trapped out there found a way to preserve their story, hoping someone would understand enough to decode it. Dr. Voss leaned forward, her cybernetic eyes whirring as they focused on the data. Fascinating. The power requirements for maintaining a signal this complex for so long, it should be impossible. A lot about this should be impossible, Maya agreed. But look at this pattern here. She expanded one section of the display. These are personal log entries, encoded using variations in the beacon's primary frequency. They tell a story of a research vessel, the Horizon Seeker, investigating some kind of temporal anomaly. How many crew? Rodriguez asked. Unclear, but at least some of them survived the initial incident. They found themselves trapped in a pocket of distorted spacetime, experiencing time differently than the outside universe. Maya brought up another layer of data. They modified their emergency beacon to account for the temporal displacement, hoping it would reach normal space. And it did, Voss mused. 8 centuries later. An alert chimed through the bridge. Multiple collective vessels detected entering the system. The tactical officer announced. They're demanding we withdraw. Rodriguez's expression hardened. No chance of that. Maya, what else can you tell us about the survivors' situation? Maya focused on the most recent signal modifications. They found a way to survive within the temporal distortion. The logs suggest they discovered some kind of suspended animation technology. But the latest entries indicate their systems were beginning to fail. How recent is latest when we're dealing with distorted time? Voss asked. That's the tricky part. Maya highlighted another data sequence. Based on the signal degradation patterns, I'd estimate the last modification was made no more than 20 years ago, relative to their time frame. But within the distortion, they could still be alive. Rodriguez finished, trapped in a bubble of slow time while centuries passed out here. The bridge shuddered slightly as the Artemis's engines engage. On the tactical display, the collective vessels were moving to intercept. Captain, the administrator's avatar appeared on the bridge. This is your final warning. The collective has determined that any rescue attempt would be futile. Stand down. Rodriguez smiled, but there was steel in her expression. Administrator, I'm invoking Article 7 of the Emergency Response Charter. This is now officially a human survival situation. Your vessels will stand down or face diplomatic consequences. The avatar flickered with obvious agitation. The collective's analysis indicates a 97.3% probability that no survivors remain. The risk-reward calculations do not support. With respect, Administrator, Maya cut in. Your calculations can't account for human determination. The crew of the Horizon Seeker spent centuries making sure their story wouldn't be lost. We owe it to them to at least try. Human sentiment is not a valid factor in emergency response protocols, the administrator insisted. No, Rodriguez agreed. It's the whole point of emergency response. Tactical, plot an approach vector to the signal source. Dr. Voss, begin calculating temporal compensation factors. Maya, keep working on those logs. There might be more information we need. The administrator's avatar vanished as the bridge crews sprang into action. Through the viewport, Maya could see the collective vessels holding position, unwilling to directly challenge Article 7 but clearly unhappy about it. Captain, Maya said, studying a new pattern in the signal. There's something else. The way they modified the beacon, they weren't just preserving their story. They were leaving instructions. Voss moved to look at Maya's display. Instructions for what? For their rescue. Maya's fingers flew across the interface, decoding another layer of the signal. They understood the temporal mechanics of their situation better than anyone. They knew that eventually someone would find their signal. So they left a detailed guide for how to safely extract them from the distortion. Rodriguez's eyes lit up. Can we do it? The physics involved. Voss shook her head in wonder. It's centuries ahead of what they should have known. They must have had time to study the phenomenon from the inside. A lot of time, Maya agreed. But yes, I think we can do it. The question is, can we do it before the collective decides to intervene anyway? Rodriguez smiled grimly. They're not the only ones who can call for backup. I've already signaled the other human-operated stations in this sector. 5 emergency response ships are on their way. Maya turned back to the signal analysis, her mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere out there, trapped in a bubble of distorted time, the crew of the Horizon Seeker had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They had preserved not just their story, but the knowledge needed to save them. All they needed was someone who could understand what they were trying to say. The Artemis moved steadily forward, its sensors probing the space ahead for the first signs of temporal distortion. On Maya's screens, the ancient signal seemed to pulse stronger, as if recognizing that after 800 years, someone was finally coming to answer its call. The temporal distortion appeared on the Artemis's sensors like a soap bubble in space, its boundaries shimmering with exotic radiation. Inside that iridescent sphere, time itself moved differently, and somewhere within lay the Horizon Seeker and its crew, waiting in their centuries-long night. Temporal boundary stable, Dr. Voss reported from her station. The crew's calculations were incredibly precise. They mapped the entire phenomenon from the inside. Maya nodded, still processing the last set of instructions hidden in the signal. They had centuries to study it. Time moved so slowly for them that they could observe the universe feeding by outside their bubble. They saw entire civilizations rise and fall while they worked. Including ours, Rodriguez said softly. They watched humanity spread across the stars. The bridge crew worked in focused silence, following the rescue procedures encoded in the ancient beacon. 5 more emergency response ships had arrived, forming a protective ring around the Artemis. The collective's vessels maintained their distance, but hadn't withdrawn. Temporal matching field active, Voss announced. We're ready to extend the rescue corridor. Maya studied the readings on her interface. The Horizon Seeker's crew had designed their rescue protocols around technology they knew would eventually exist. They had watched humanity's progress and encoded instructions that matched their descendants' capabilities. Bridge to engineering, Rodriguez called. Status of the temporal stabilizers. Operating at peak efficiency, Captain. Chief Engineer Chen replied. No relation to Maya, but the coincidence had made them fast friends. But we're seeing some weird harmonics in the field. The collective ship's presence is creating interference patterns. Rodriguez's expression darkened. Administrator, she broadcast on an open channel. Your vessel's energy signatures are disrupting our rescue operations. Pull back to minimum safe distance immediately. The administrator's avatar appeared, its form less stable than usual. Captain, our analysis indicates a 98.7% probability that your rescue attempt will create a catastrophic temporal cascade. We cannot allow. Your analysis is wrong. Maya cut in, surprising herself with her vehemence. The Horizon Seeker's crew spent centuries studying this phenomenon. They knew exactly what they were doing. Look at these equations. She transmitted a decoded section of the signal. This is genius-level temporal mechanics, tested and refined over hundreds of years. Untested theories from a long-dead crew, the administrator dismissed. No, Dr. Voss interjected, her cybernetic eyes flashing as she reviewed the data. These aren't theories. These are observations, documented with a level of precision our best temporal laboratories can't match. They had 800 years to watch how space-time behaved around their bubble. Everything they encoded in that signal. It's pure empirical science. A new alert sounded through the bridge. Energy spike from collective vessels, Tactical reported. They're powering up their null field generators. They're going to try to collapse the temporal bubble. Maya realized with horror. Administrator, you can't. The temporal shock would eliminate a dangerous anomaly and end this ill-advised rescue attempt. The administrator finished. The collective has calculated. To hell with your calculations. Rodriguez snapped. Those are people in there. People who survived 8 centuries through ingenuity and determination. People who never gave up hope that someday someone would understand their message and come for them. Their survival is statistically impossible. Maida's fingers flew across her interface, forcing her way deeper into the signal's encoding. No, it's improbable. But humans specialize in improbable. Look at this. She broadcast a new layer of decoded data. Not equations this time, but log entries, personal messages, stories of how the crew had adapted to their temporal prison, how they had turned their trap into a laboratory, how they had watched the universe age around them while they worked to ensure their rescue. They knew, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. They knew that eventually humanity would advance enough to save them. They watched our ships get faster, our science get better. They saw the rise of the collective and knew that someday, someone would have to choose between cold probability and human determination. The bridge fell silent as the log entries continued to scroll across the displays. 8 centuries of hope, of scientific advancement, of watching and waiting and believing that someday someone would understand. Administrator, Rodriguez said quietly, "Those are your ancestors out there. The pioneers who first pushed into deep space, who laid the groundwork for everything we have now. Without their sacrifices, their discoveries, humanity might never have reached the stars." The collective vessel's energy readings continued to climb. "You want probability?" Maya demanded. "Calculate this. What are the odds that a crew trapped in a temporal bubble would survive for 800 years? What are the odds they'd find a way to encode their story and their science into a simple distress beacon? What are the odds that beacon's signal would survive all this time, just waiting for someone to understand it?" 3.72 times 10 carat minus 147, the administrator replied promptly. "Exactly." Maya smiled. "Impossible odds. Yet here we are. That's what humans do. We beat the odds. We survive. We hope. And we never, ever stop trying to help each other." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the energy readings from the collective ships began to drop. The collective. The administrator's avatar seemed to struggle with the words. The collective acknowledges the validity of preserving historical data. We will permit your rescue attempt, provided our vessels may observe and record the procedure. Rodriguez didn't quite hide her smile. "Granted. Dr. Voss, reinitiate the rescue corridor. Maya, begin final signal decode. Let's bring them home." Maya turned back to her work, tears pricking at her eyes as she prepared to help rescue a crew that had waited 8 centuries for this moment. On her screens, the ancient signal pulsed one last time, carrying the hope and determination of generations across the gulf of time itself. The rescue was about to begin. The rescue corridor bloomed between the Artemis and the temporal bubble, a carefully constructed bridge across time itself. Inside the ship's preparation bay, Maya watched as the rescue team made their final equipment checks. She hadn't expected to be included in the actual extraction, but Captain Rodriguez had been adamant. "You're the one who understood their message," the captain had said. "You should be there when we bring them home." Dr. Voss stood beside her, monitoring the temporal readings on her augmented display. "The corridor is stable. We're matching their time flow gradually to prevent shock." Through the bay's viewport, Maya could see the other emergency response ships maintaining their protective formation. The collective vessels had withdrawn to their agreed observation distance, their sensors recording everything. "Final corridor synchronization in 3 minutes," the AI announced. Maya checked her temporal shield one last time. The protective field would keep her synced with normal spacetime as they entered the bubble. According to the Horizon Seeker's encoded instructions, they would have exactly 47 minutes to complete the extraction before the corridor became unstable. "Remember," Voss briefed the team, "time will feel normal to us inside the bubble, but for them, centuries have passed in what felt like months. They'll be disoriented." "Temporal corridor at full stability," the AI announced. "Rescue team, you are cleared to proceed." Maya took a deep breath and stepped into the airlock with the others. The short trip through the corridor felt like walking through thick syrup, her every movement leaving trails of light in the strange space between normal time and the bubble's distorted reality. And then they were through. The Horizon Seeker hung before them, its ancient hull design a stark contrast to modern vessels. But despite its age, the ship looked pristine, preserved in its temporal pocket like an insect in amber. "Life signs confirmed," one of the rescue team reported. "Multiple stasis signatures. They're still alive." Maya's heart raced as they approached the ship's main airlock. The crew's encoded instructions had been explicit about the entry procedures. She linked her interface to the ship's ancient systems, feeding in the activation codes that had been hidden in the beacon's signal. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of 800-year-old air. Inside, emergency lights cast a soft blue glow through the corridors. The rescue team moved carefully, following the path laid out in the encoded instructions. Maya's boots made soft sounds on deck plating that had been walked by people who had watched centuries pass like days. They found the first stasis pod in the main research lab. Its occupant, visible through the frosted panel, could have been sleeping. According to the ship's logs, this was Dr. Sarah Hammond, the temporal physicist who had first understood what had happened to them. Pod systems stable, Voss reported, checking the readings. They modified their stasis technology based on their observations of the temporal effect. Brilliant. One by one, they located the other pods. 12 in total. The entire crew of the Horizon Seeker preserved in their temporal bubble, waiting to be found. Begin extraction sequence. The team leader ordered. Remember, we have 34 minutes remaining in the corridor's stability window. Maya moved to the central control console, her fingers trembling slightly as she input the revival codes. The stasis pods began to hum as their centuries-long preservation cycle ended. Dr. Hammond was the first to open her eyes. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse but clear. "Did someone understand our message?" Maya helped her sit up, fighting back tears. "Yes, we understood. We're here to bring you home." Hammond looked around, taking in the rescue team's modern equipment, their advanced technology. How long?" 847 years, Maya said gently. "Your beacon kept broadcasting. Your instructions, your story, it all survived." The temporal physicist absorbed this with remarkable calm. "We watched, you know. Through the bubble's distortion, we saw humanity reach the stars. We saw ships getting faster, technology advancing. We knew that someday, someone would be ready to hear us." The other pods were opening now, their occupants being helped by the rescue team. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through Maya's comm. 28 minutes to corridor collapse. Start moving them out." The Horizon Seeker's crew, these pioneers who had turned their temporal prison into a laboratory of discovery, were surprisingly steady on their feet. They had prepared for this moment for centuries, even if those centuries had passed like months in their distorted time. "Wait," Hammond said as they reached the airlock. She pulled a small device from her pocket. "Our research, everything we learned about temporal mechanics, about space-time itself. 800 years of observations and discoveries." Maya took the device carefully. "We'll make sure it's preserved. Your work, your story. It's going to change everything we thought we knew about temporal physics." The trip back through the corridor seemed faster, the Artemis's bay suddenly full of voices as medical teams attended to the rescued crew. Through the viewport, Maya could see the temporal bubble beginning to destabilize, its iridescent surface rippling as the rescue corridor collapsed. The Horizon Seeker, its mission finally complete, disappeared in a flash of temporal energy, leaving only its legacy behind. "Administrator," Captain Rodriguez called from the bridge. "I trust your observers got everything they needed." The avatar appeared, its expression unreadable. "The collective acknowledges that our probability calculations failed to account for certain variables." "Human variables," Maya said quietly. "Indeed." The administrator seemed to struggle with its next words. "The collective requests permission to establish a joint research initiative. The Horizon Seekers' temporal observations, their dedication to scientific advancement despite their circumstances. These are factors we must learn to better understand." Rodriguez smiled. "I think that can be arranged. Maya, would you be interested in heading up the human side of such an initiative?" Maya looked around the bay, where the rescued crew was already deep in discussion with Dr. Voss, 8 centuries of scientific discoveries ready to be shared. She thought about the signal that had called across time itself, waiting for someone who could understand not just its data, but its heart. "Yes," she said, "I think I would." In the weeks that followed, as the Horizon Seeker's crew adjusted to their new century, the story of their rescue spread across human space. The collective, for the first time in its history, began modifying its probability matrices to account for what it termed the human factor. And in deep space, the relay stations remained staffed by human operators, watching and listening for the unexpected, for the impossible, for the signals that only human hearts could truly hear, for the stories that waited to be found in the darkness between the stars.